Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jason Jensen and you're watching Jason Jensen Trains. Today we are back working on my HO scale layout. The reason the camera's zoomed out a ways is because I wanted to talk a little bit about prepping your room before you even begin your layout. And this might not apply to everyone, but I think that most modelers want their area around their layout to look as nice as their layout. Just to let you know what I've done, we are in the basement and this is a concrete floor. And the first thing I did was I stained the concrete. And this is what I used. So I scrubbed the floor really good with a brush and then a sponge and got it as clean as I could. Made sure it was completely dry and then put my stain on it. And there is a little bit of an odor to it. And then give it a good, it says on the can how long it takes to dry, but I think it adds a really nice finish. I think it looks great, so I'm happy with it. And another thing which is new are the stools. I have 4 of these and I love the height of them. You'll be able to sit and operate the trains and you can still see all of it because you're up high enough. You're not down too low. I have 4 of these stools, so just something to think about. My track is at the lowest part where it starts is at 41 inches from the track to the floor, which is 3.5 feet. And then my stools are 31 inches. So, and they're nice and heavy, nice and sturdy. I mean, there's no chance of them tipping over. Just another option for you, because eventually I probably will have guests over and they won't need to stand the entire time. And then also if you're operating, if you have a few people operating, they can be sitting. So, okay, I want to go over some updates. And in my last video, I talked about placement of structures. And as model railroaders, we are telling an unwritten story. So we're creating a history in our layout. Whether your layout is set in the 20s or 30s or even the present day, you're telling a story. The town I live in has been here for years and years and years, and it has changed throughout the years. I'm doing my layout more in the 30s, 40s, possibly as new as the 50s. I'm not really sure yet. In that time period, they were not, they were limited on money. So when they built things, say they were building a structure with a road next to it and there were some giant oak trees that had been there for years and years, chances are they would just build next to it. They would put the road around it. Now today they would either cut the trees down or move them. Now, I've seen many times where they dig a tree up from the roots and then replant it somewhere else. But the point is, I think too many modelers plan it all at once. you start first by figuring out how much room that you have, and then drawing out your track plan, and then drawing out maybe where your city is going to go, and where countryside is going to go, and where buildings are going to be placed. And you know, after your track's down, maybe you plan your roads, and you make all of your roads maybe a gray cement. Well, I think for me, I notice when I'm looking at things that they change throughout the years. A cement road gets replaced, and then eventually maybe they put blacktop over it. You know, and they add on to by making it wider. So keep that in mind when you're working on your layout, or even working on a diorama. We talked last time about not having everything at 90-degree angles. Rather than having this building sit parallel with the edge, we're going to move it at a slant, which just adds a little bit more interest to it. And maybe we'll put a tree over here, and we'll curve the sidewalk around the tree, rather than putting our sidewalk straight and then putting the tree next to it. We want to make it look like the tree was there first, then they put in a building next to the tree, and then decided later on maybe that they wanted a sidewalk, and so then they had to make the sidewalk go around the tree. So like I had just mentioned about creating a story or history with your layout or diorama, one of the things that I've been doing to create a little bit of history on this is I have been building my piers in different styles so that they're not all the same. I don't want it to look like this was all built in 1 year. Where, you know, they built all of the piers in the same exact style out of the same exact wood, and they all match. So I am changing the style of piers that I'm building, and also changing the stain that I'm using on the wood for the piers. I definitely want them to look like they were built at different times. You know, maybe they started with the structures along this wall right here. Maybe they started at this end and worked this way, and then, you know, years later they started maybe on the sides here and then continued to expand out. So same with my the roof style or the shingles that I use. I'm definitely using different shades of browns and tans for the shingles to make it look like they were built at different times. So I think that's very important, and I know that I've mentioned it quite a few times already, but with anything, with a diorama or a layout, no matter what year you're modeling, I think that you want to add a variety of styles to show that it was not all just planned all at once and built all within a year. You want it to look like, maybe it takes you a year to build your layout, but you want it to look like it took 20, 30, 50 years for it to develop and get to the point where it is right now. I think creating a history is what makes it more realistic. And then also, I can't stress enough, researching and using photos. Get photo reference. Now when I first started, I didn't use photo reference at all. I just collected magazines and saw what other modelers were doing and tried to copy that, and And then by doing that, I sort of developed my own style and my own techniques. And now I'm to the point where I have certain techniques down that I use a lot, but I want to use them correctly. I want to use them in a way that looks realistic. And the best way to do that is to get photo reference. You can buy the most expensive paints, the most expensive kits, the most expensive material for scenery. And if you don't know how to make it work so that it looks real, it's going to be difficult. I've seen people use inexpensive scenery material, but the way that they placed it, it made it look very natural. And that's what you want to do, whether you're doing a layout or a small diorama. You want it to look natural. I want to give a quick shout out to a friend and fellow modeler, Pablo, who sent me coffee all the way from Costa Rica. And it tastes, it's amazing. It really is great coffee. So thank you very much. Okay, let's head over to the workbench and get some work done, and then we'll come back over and place some stuff that we worked on onto the layout, and I'll take the camera off the tripod and give you a close-up look so that you can see exactly what's changed on it. So I've started working on a kit from Bar Mills. It is called Waterfront Willies. And they do give you some examples of other ways to build it. And it doesn't have to be necessarily for a waterfront. They show it built as a gas station, another gas station. So it can be used for other purposes. This is how I'm going to build mine. Not these colors, but I am building it on a pier like this. So it's nice that they have nice detailed photographs for you. Another nice thing is that I don't know if all Bar Mill kits are like this, but most of the kits that I have built from Bar Mills come with a set of drawings that are to scale, full-size drawings. So later on, if you wanted to scratch build this, you could use this as a template. Or if you wanted to possibly just make it build it again as a one-story structure that maybe could be used for something else in industrial area or gas station or anything that you want. It's nice that they give you the full scale drawings so that you could lay it down. I would probably tape it down, then put a clear piece of wax paper over it, and you could scratch build it. So very nice. I'm moving right along on it, following the instructions. So I've got my walls all braced, and they've been drying for 24 hours. And they had weights on them. I weighted them after I glued the bracing on. And then I also glued the bottom onto the pier. So we're going to mix up a stain. And sorry, I just haven't taken the time to clean my palette. So I'm just mixing a brown and a gray. Again, burnt umber and neutral gray. And then we'll do a little bit of black. Too much black. And then pour in some water. Now we'll just take a scrap piece of wood and test it. And we'll quick dry it. I did lift a couple of the boards here and there, not many. So as you can see, I don't have an exact science. I mix it just randomly, so that all of my structures, I don't want all of my structures to look the same. I want them to look like they were built at different times, possibly even different wood was used. So I highly recommend treating each structure separately. You know, I'm sure there's some people that will write down the formula. They know exactly the percentage of each color that they put in the mix, how much water, they measure it out. I'm not that way at all. It's different every time that I do it. And I think that it gives the structure a unique look by doing it that way. Okay, and at the same time, we'll do some little wood parts on here. And I left them on here because they're little and I didn't really want to brace them. But by leaving them in here, it gives it some support that'll prevent it from warping. But if they do start to warp a little bit, we'll just apply our wash to the back side of it also. Okay, I think what I want to do after, they're not completely dry yet, but after just seeing what it looks like, it looks a little too brown to me. I'm going for more of a gray look. So we will get slate gray. And we'll add a little bit of black. Okay, I'm going to dry these quick, and then we'll put this wash over it. So our pieces are all dry. I mixed my new stain with black and slate gray. I'm also going to add a little bit of this dark gray called zinc. The reason I am mixing in this zinc color is because it has a little bit of a bluish, almost a purple tint to it. So it would be considered a cool gray, not a warm gray. If a warm gray, this neutral gray is on the warm side because it has a warmer tint to it, like a little bit of a brown to it. If you actually want to make a gray warm, you could actually add a little bit of red to it, just a very little bit, and it will make it look more in the brown family. Where if you take a blue and add blue, just a small amount of blue to the gray, it puts it more into the cool family. So you have, you know, warm colors and cool colors. I'm not doing a very good job of describing that to you. I just, years of being an artist, and using the colors so much. It just is a natural thing for me. So I am going more for a cool gray than a warm gray. I'm going to switch to a bigger brush. I try to explain things the best I can, but I don't consider myself to be a teacher or really a public speaker. I just sort of do the best I can. I think for me, thankfully, I'm very thankful that a lot of this comes natural to me. And I guess it's from years of being an artist. But I certainly don't think that you have to be an artist to do model railroading. I think that it takes experience. So the more you do, the more you learn, the more techniques you try, the more you learn. You just get better and better with every model that you build. This is definitely turning out more the way I pictured it now. But I think, again, I've talked about this many times, about working in layers. And I had to do the first stain to get to this shade. So don't think that you could certainly mix it one time, the exact shade that you want, and brush it on and be done. I usually end up doing 2, sometimes 3 washes over a structure, and it just I think it adds to the realism by doing it that way, by working in layers. So now after these dry, you could go over it again and do more of just individual boards, and I think I will do that. So I'll dry these, maybe actually add just a tiny bit of blue to this. I'm thinking I have a deep midnight blue. I'll add just a little bit of that to it, and then just do some individual boards. And maybe go a little bit more towards the bottom to darken it up. So again, we're using deep midnight blue. So we're just going to do some individual boards. And maybe we'll go a little heavier towards the bottom. Now it looks a little extreme right now, but that will soak into the wood, and when it's completely dry, it'll definitely blend in a little more. And then we'll go over it with some Pastel Chalks and make it all blend together. I think I'm actually going to do the lower half of this is a different wood. I'll show you up close. So I'm going to make the bottom of this a solid color. I don't know if you can see, hopefully. You can see that there's thinner boards along the bottom than on the top. So I am making it darker, and I think I'll make my trim color and window color this bluish gray. I'm really liking this. And none of my other structures are like this. I have never mixed a blue into my gray mix, and so this is something new, and I like it. Now we'll take a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm using 150 grit sandpaper. and going the same direction as the boards. We're lightly sanding it. And not evenly, like we're going this direction, same direction. We'll move down a little bit. So we're not evenly sanding the entire thing. We're just doing random areas. Heavier in some areas and lighter in others. Just adds to the weathering of it. Okay, I think that has a really nice old weathered look to it. Now we'll take our Pastel Chalks, and you can either just take your brush and brush over them and then brush it directly onto your model, or you could lay out a piece of paper and sand it and get a pile of powder and do it that way, and then dip your brush in the powder. I just simply brush over the pastel chalk and then brush it on. I'm brushing over the black right now, maybe around the door. There's probably some trim too that gets added, so we'll go real light right now with this, but after we get our windows in and trim and get it assembled, then we'll go back in and weather it more with the pastel chalks. So I've painted the trim color and all of the trim and doors and windows. I used the dark gray, the zinc, and the deep midnight blue. So real quick, I wanted to show you that when I braced these walls, I went the full length, even though I went through that top window. Because then, after it's all dry, I just cut it and took that piece out. And I'll show you quick on this one. And then we'll just do a little bit along the edge here, a little here, and then we take our pliers and very gently just snap it. So that prevented that from curling or warping when we painted it. So I've done quite a bit on it. I've got all of the shutters put on and all of the trim, stained all the boards for the dock that it sits on. Great little kit. Very simple instructions to follow. Everything fits together really well. Next, I'm going to paint my rafter tails and glue those in place, and then I can put my riff cards on. So I've gotten quite a bit done on it. Cut and glued in some of my pilings, not all of them, obviously. And then built the staircase and railing on the side. Still have to do some painting on it. And I'm going to do some weathering with some pastel chalks also on here to give it more of an aged look. The roof is all done. And then for the tar paper here, I just used black construction paper that I spray painted a flat black. and then did some dry brushing on it after it was in place. And then just simply took my knife and lifted some of the edges. And I will go in with some Pastel Chalks and add dirt along the bottom and weather the boards a little bit more. So, and again, for those of you that haven't seen some of my past videos, these are the pastels that I use. They are called soft pastels. And let's see, this is a pack of 48. And the other pack that I have, I believe, had all the... Yeah, this was the pack that had all of the brown tone, more of the earth tones in it. Here's another brand that you can get. This one is Artist Loft. This was a 24 piece. A lot of the shades up here, I think these were possibly grays. It goes into a black, some browns. But again, they are soft pastels. Very inexpensive. And I got these at either Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And I probably ended up using a coupon for 40% off one item and bought this. So very inexpensive. And these sticks will last for years. So I decided to take a little break from the Bar Mills kit, and I went back to this kit. And I've been adding lots of details and just putting the finishing touches on it. I still have more to do on it, but it's definitely coming together. We're near the end on this one. I took a break from the last kit because I felt I was starting to slow down a little bit on it. So to keep the same pace going, I like to have 2 or 3 projects going so that I can sort of jump around, so that I can keep the same level of excitement maybe on a project. So as soon as I start to get a little bored or start to slow down a little bit, I can then go to another project, work on that, and then come back to it. And it's nice when you let it sit for a little while and then you come back and you sort of have a fresh perspective on the project. And like I said, I still have more to do on this. I still have to put bracing underneath this, make all of the crosses under it, and I'll show you another one. So underneath it will look like this with all the bracing under it. So here's another one that I am still working on, and you can see I have all my detail parts and they're just sitting there. They're not glued in place, but I spray painted all of the castings a flat black. You could also do a flat gray, but I suggest putting a primer on your castings before you paint them. So I usually go with a flat black or a flat gray. I was out of gray spray paint, so I went with black. The black is nice because you end up doing a lot of dry brushing. You don't have to get it in the cracks. If you leave the black in the crack or the dark gray in the cracks, that's sort of your shadow. Let me hold this up and see if... So you can see on the Lobster Traps where I just left the black. And same with all of the boxes. So I thought I would show you quick how I paint some of the detail castings. And let's paint some lobster traps. So we're going to use neutral gray and burnt umber. So it's mostly neutral gray, and then we're just mixing a little bit of brown with it. And we're just kind of dry brushing. Let me zoom in so that you can see a little better. So as you can see, I am not like going real careful. I'm just brushing over it. Even if this color gets in some of the it's fine. So this is really just sort of a base. Our black was our original base, and now we're just really adding a gray brown mix over it. Now while we have that color still there and it's still kind of wet, we're going to add some water to it. We're just brushing over, we're doing a wash. And don't worry, it looks like you're completely painting it solid, but because there's a lot of water in it, you're creating a wash, and when that wash dries, that black will show through. It won't be as black anymore, it'll have this grayish brown color over it. Okay, now we'll let that one dry. This one has two different styles of lobster traps. You can see there's square ones and then the rounded ones. And you can see there's quite a bit of detail. Okay, so I mixed my color, wipe a bunch off the brush, and then if you can see, I'm holding the brush sideways and brushing over it. This part is time consuming, but I think the details really make the model and really make it come to life. And then when I put some figures around here, it'll really come to life. Okay, and then again, maybe we'll add a bunch of water over here and do a little bit of a wash over it. Okay, now we're going to use sorry, desert sand, and it's really just a tan. Any tan will do. And we're also going to mix slate gray with it. Now we really want to be careful with this one and go light. The great thing about these, if you paint it and you don't like it, you can just paint it black again. If you want to, you could soak it in hot water, take like a toothbrush, an old toothbrush, and scrub over it. And because it's water-based paint, the paint will come off. It might not come off completely, but most of it will. And then paint it black again, or paint it gray primer, and start over. Okay, now I'm going to use raw sienna. So it's a lot of water. It's just a thin wash. And we're just going to go along the edges. Just this represents maybe rust. There's all nails that hold these together. Go maybe a little darker on some of these. Hopefully that's showing up good, seeing the rust on it. And I think sitting on this wood, I'll move it so that you can see it better. I think that looks nice sitting on there. It's a nice contrast with the wood that's already on there. So I think that's important to remember. You don't want to paint it the same as this, so that otherwise it would just blend in. If you use the same stain as the stain that you use on your decking, on your wood, you want there to be a contrast. And you can definitely see a contrast with this. And don't get too hung up on every little detail on it, because as you can see, with all the details that you put on here, and after they're all painted and you have figures on here and the crane, it'll be a very busy scene, and you're not going to zero in on one little lobster trap to notice if there's any imperfections in it. You're seeing it as an overall scene with lots of detail. So don't get too hung up on being super worried about getting everything to look perfect. Real quick, I did want to mention some of these I noticed after I painted them that I didn't clean them up all that well. I thought I did, but I missed some stuff. But if you just take a file, because it's resin, it'll file really, really easy. You actually have to be careful because it's actually pretty soft. You can actually take too much off if you're not careful. So while I've got all my paints out, let's paint some more castings. We have here a stack of crates. I'm going to start with antique gold. Now it's going to look pretty yellow to you at first, but that's okay. We're going to go over it with tans and browns. And don't get nervous if you do this at home. It almost has a greenish tint to it, but again, we're going to go over it with some other colors, a wash, and some more dry brushing, and it will look good when it's all done. We don't have to worry too much about the back side of this. You still want to paint it, you just don't have to go as detailed maybe on the back side. That's why I think it helps to lay out all of your castings on your model to see where they're going to go. Like this one will go here, and the back side of it, it's really difficult to see. Maybe if you had the camera over here, you might see a little bit of it, but really the whole back side of this casting isn't going to show much. Now we can take and add, actually let's add some burnt umber. And we're adding a lot of water. So now we're just putting a wash over it. And we're getting it in most of the cracks. Some we're just leaving the black, but really we're trying to go over most of it. I'll hold this up to the camera in a second after I get this all washed. Now we'll quick dry this. Okay, so now let's take our desert sand. Really, if you wanted to, you could leave it at this point. It does look nice. It has a nice contrast on the wood that's already there. I'm going to put some highlights on it. Now this is really a light dry brushing, and the more you go over it, the more the paint dries on your brush, and it almost becomes almost like a powder. Really, there's hardly any on the brush. I just keep going over it. Okay, I'm going to try to give you a close-up look, and I'm going to point out the difference in piers. Notice the style of these two compared to this pier over here. And then also notice the different rooftops. These shingles compared to these shingles, or even these over here. This corner structure here is going to get turned into a seafood restaurant, and there'll be a pier under it, and then stairs leading up to that top level. In between all of the piers there will be walkways, and then steps that go down, and small piers with railings. I still have to do the bridge that goes across right here. That'll be a fun project. So there's an overall view. Still lots of work to do, but it's really taking shape. I haven't started any of my boats yet. That's a pretty big project. I hope this was a helpful video. No matter what level you're at, no matter where you're starting in the hobby, the most important thing is to have fun. It's a hobby. Enjoy yourself. Make things that you can be proud of. I love walking into my workshop and my layout room here and seeing the progress that I'm making, and it's a thrill. It gives me a thrill. I absolutely love it, and I want that for you. Whether you're building a diorama or just an individual structure or weathering a boxcar, take your time and do the best that you can possibly do, so that when you look at it, you can be proud of the work that you've done and know that the next thing that you build is going to be even better. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy modeling, everyone.